The epistles of John are loaded with several different type of good tests. There's all sorts of different parts of the scripture we can look at, and we can test things that we're going through or test parts of ourselves, and that can help give us reassurance of our salvation as a result of these tests. There's also a number of tests about false teachers. And as we work through some of these things, it can be a little bit confusing if we don't look at it correctly. So today we're going to look at one of these tests, and we're going to work through it to see just how effective it actually is. 3 John verse 11 says, "Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God." So here we have a command followed by one of these tests, and the command is pretty straightforward. Don't imitate evil things, but instead do good things. It doesn't get much more straightforward than that. After the command, like we said, then we have the test. And the test is maybe a little bit less straightforward. Superficially, this would seem to work, right? Anybody who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does not has not seen God. Okay, that makes sense. But the question is, does that work all of the time? And if not, why not? I mean, it's the Bible. And so unless it's hyperbole in here, then this test needs to be reliable because it's scripture. And on the surface, it doesn't feel very good because the logic would seem to indicate that you have to be a Christian to do good things. And that would mean that all Muslims and Buddhists, Hindus, agnostics, and well, everybody else would therefore be incapable of performing even the most basic of good deeds. And that just doesn't sound right. Well, let's try this test out using kind of a ridiculous example, and we'll see what happens. All right, this guy right here is a man named Yesu Oyingbo, and he's dead now, but he was from Nigeria. He lived in the United States for a little while. Oyingbo was a successful businessman, and he was also a cult leader. It's kind of hard to nail it down, but people believe he had somewhere between 30 and 80 wives, and there's rumors that he fathered children with 2 of his daughters, in addition to all the other women that he fathered children with. Although, in all fairness to him, I don't think those allegations were ever proven. And Oyingbo also claimed, on top of all of this, to be Jesus. In June of 1959, he publicly stated, "I am he. I am Jesus Christ, the very one whose second coming was foretold in the New Testament. I have come, and those who believe in me will have an everlasting life and joy. I am the missing of the Trinity. I have come to prepare the faithful for the judgment day." So this man claimed to be Jesus himself, and in his cult, he kind of mixed some Christianity with some Islam and also with some pagan traditions of the day. And he wound up with this kind of hybrid religion. And that all sounds pretty wacky. And let me tell you, if you read up on the guy, it makes for some very interesting reading. But one more thing that we have to note about Oyingbo is that he gave money to charity. He urged his followers, or maybe even required them, to give money to the poor. And he was very wealthy, and he had a lot of followers. And so through him, a lot of charitable contributions were distributed. A lot of poor people were aided. They were helped. And you could say what you want to about the man's sinfulness. The fact still remains that through this charity, Oyingbo did some good things too. And so if we take that idea and funnel it back through 3 John verse 11, anyone who does good is from God, then we see Oyingbo was doing good. Therefore, according to this verse, he must have been from God. And if that's the case, then he must have been right about his claims of deity too, right? Well, we don't have to think too hard to recognize that that's not true. So if Oyingbo wasn't a godly man in reality, then does that mean we have to throw away 3 John verse 11? Well, no, we don't. It actually holds up very nicely, even in this case, even with our ridiculous example. While 3 John verse 11 means what it says and says what it means, we do ourselves a disservice to read this verse out of the context of the rest of the letter. The fact of the matter is 3 John verse 11 comes right after 3 John verse 10, which comes after verse 9, which comes after verse 8, and so on and so forth. And when we take all of these verses together, it becomes clear that 3 John chapter 11 was meant to be taken literally, but it was to provide us a test to use not for everybody all the time, but for people within the church. At this part in the letter, John has just finished warning the congregation about a man named Diotrephes. He was a member of the church. He was a prominent member of the church, and he was apparently causing problems. He was trying to keep at least certain Christians out of the church. He was trying to block John's message from the congregation. It was a problem, and so John says earlier on in this letter that he's going to deal with that when he shows up. But in the meantime, verse 11, dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Here's our command. And so very literally, when we put these things together, John is saying, don't imitate Diotrephes. And then we have the test. The one who is doing good is from God, and the one who is doing evil is not from God. And this test is given immediately after we have this contrasting tension between John and Diotrephes. So literally, this test was meant to be applied to judge between John and Diotrephes, and it works every single time. And by extension, we can also use this principle of this test to evaluate similar situations within the church body as well. Is there a conflict between two leaders within your church? If so, is one doing good and one doing evil? If that's the case, then 3 John verse 11 is all you need to properly evaluate the situation. And so once again, we see that the Bible is meant to be taken literally, and it works every time. We just have to make sure we're reading the book in the manner that it was intended to be interpreted. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's been interesting. And until next time, Lord willing, there is a next time. May God bless you and your family.